Web 2.0, software as a service, virtual desktops. Today, everything is about software. But what if we're about to enter a new era in which the name of the game is actually hardware once again? I'm Charles Araujo, and this is the TransformIT Show, presented by the Intel IT Center. A little while ago, I flew to Newark, New Jersey to talk with David Rosen, CEO of TechxFoundry, on the campus of the New Jersey Institute of Technology. There they are exploring David's belief that hardware is the new software, how personalization is driving fundamental changes in how products are produced, and what it all means for IT leaders. David, welcome to the TransformIT Show.
Thank you.
So David, I'm very excited to have you on today's show because I think that you have some really interesting ideas about where technology is going and the implications for IT professionals. But before we get to that, I want to set some context. So maybe you can just give us a little bit about your career journey and what has led you to this point.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm really glad to be here and I appreciate your time. And I come from a bootstrap background. So I was very lucky. When I went to college, I went for a business degree. And what I realized was that business was very practical to me and I needed to do something more detailed. So I decided to get more of a technical background. So I got a business degree with an information systems concentration. Somehow that led me to take on assignments with professors on some of their consulting work that I would do. So I took three paths from there. The first path was being a technology-oriented person. The second path was advising the Tech 200 on business opportunities that they would have. So that led me to being able to go through 38 transactions, mostly on the buy side with the Tech 200 to 500, and I've been through transactions of companies $500,000 in revenue all the way up to a couple $1 billion in size. The other path that I've taken is to crazily take on leading businesses, both business units of large companies, as well as I've had 4 startups and 1.5 successful exits out of those startups. So I've been involved in hardware, software, semiconductors, and a variety of technology in my background.
And I think that's led you up to actually why we're here in this factory, I guess is what we'd call this. What would you call this that we're in?
This is, I would call it a manufacturing museum. And the dust is probably older than we are.
And so I think this career path that you just described led you to what you're doing now and some of your ideas of this kind of, this new technology or this new, I'm not even sure, this new generation that we're kind of entering. And so describe that to us. What do you think that's coming?
It's been fascinating. So the reality is what I've learned is that hardware is the new software. What I found was that manufacturing has a chance for the next industrial revolution. So we've gone through our offshoring revolution. Now it's time to bring manufacturing back close and local to where the demand is. When I've looked at hardware, it's not just hardware anymore, it's not just a piece of metal. It's about the hardware being smart. So we've had, over the past 5 to 10 years, you've heard about the Internet of Things. Well, the Internet of Devices is already out there. There's devices that are sending data back to some sort of central database. Those devices are now becoming two-way. They're getting smarter. They're enabling the market to collect data. Then the question is, what's going to happen with that data? What can you do with it? So now equipment can send back information back to a central operations that says, hey, turn my valve off because it's overpressured. Turn my valve on because I'm getting too much heat. We didn't have that information before. That whole change in the architecture is just at its infancy.
And so if I can sum that up, what I'm hearing you say is that as this evolves and the Internet of Things and all the things you just talked about really starts coming to the forefront, this idea of hardware as new software really says that it's not enough to just have the software, that the technology, the physical hardware in whatever form is going to have to be smart to be able to make all of this work. And that actually represents a pretty significant shift for IT organizations and for technologists as they start thinking about it, right? And part of that you were explaining when we were off camera was about this idea of personalization, right? So explain how that's driving it.
Right, so two things driving personalization. If you look at your phone, what went into that phone is no longer one specialty of engineering. What goes into that phone is there's a material scientist who understands the case and the metal. There's a material science who understands the glass. There's electronic engineers dealing with the electronics and the boards inside. There's RF engineers that deal with the radio waves and the filtering and the noise. There are 10 to 15 different functions that go into it. Those are all smart parts that have to go into those components, and it requires collaboration across the people. So that's one thing that's going on. They're getting more complex, they're getting smarter. It's not just hardware, it's a whole device and software inside. But what's really going on today, if you look at your phone, again as another example, is they're not making 5 million black phones and 4 million blue phones and 1 million red phones. People are demanding personalization. They're getting cases not only made around the phone, but now companies like Motorola are actually making a phone of one where it's no longer a mass manufactured phone. They will develop and put your picture on the back. They will give you an orange button around a blue dial and with a green speaker. So everything is becoming personalized. We're expecting more to be personalized. And that's playing into another advantage, which is a good topic in itself.
So I think what's interesting about that is that if we start carrying that forward, the implications for IT professionals who probably haven't had to deal with most IT professionals have never been in a place like this, right? How is that going to start changing the world? If I'm working in an IT organization at an enterprise company today, how does everything that you're seeing and everything that you're working on impact me?
So I think that there's two directions that are impacting the IT world. One is the way companies operate and manage their supply chains is going to be disrupted even more than it currently is. When you're going from the number of devices out there today, let's call it in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions or billions, that's going to be exponentially growing to 20, 50, 100 billion, depending upon who you listen to. Those devices are all going to be attached in some way, working in the framework of the enterprise, either directly or through direct connection to the supply chain partners who are providing just-in-time parts into the enterprise, especially as things are going more personalized and personalization is driving more demand for more micro-manufactured products, less volume, more personalized than a just mass-manufactured product. The second thing that's happening is the way innovation is occurring is changing, and that's having a huge impact. Even GE, who was one of the primary developers of the methodology behind the phased gate array process, has now allowed one of their engineers who went to a makerspace, that, as an example that we're going to create here for people to fabricate their own products and technologies between 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. and 2 o'clock in the morning. They allowed somebody to go into a makerspace. Well, they didn't allow it, it happened. One of their employees went into a makerspace, designed a cube-based ice cube that could go into a GE refrigerator, and said, I'd like to make this here, and wanted the intellectual property. And they looked at that and said, no, we have to retain all the property. They finally gave up and said, no, you can do this. Let's just see what happens. That person then crowdfunded the startup of this device to get to a prototype, and within 6 weeks had this prototype developed, $250,000 of cash to get the prototype done, and then GE funded it as a new product, and they got to market within a couple of months as opposed to this 24-month phased gate array investment process. So even they're learning that their process is changing. Now, if I was in IT and I had to support that, there's going to be a lot of changes going on in terms of the speed to market that's going to be affected, and how can you support that environment, I think is going to be a huge challenge.
Well, what do you think? Are we at the cusp of another transformation in which smart devices become the key differentiators in the market? It's an intriguing idea with significant ramifications for IT leaders. Most importantly, it will change the way that innovation occurs and will demand that IT step up to the plate in all new ways to support it. In the next episode, David is going to dive deeper into how you can build your own innovation skills and prepare yourself for the coming era of hardware as the new software. Until then, I'm Charles Araujo, and together we can change the world of IT.